Welcome to True Crime Pulse. Today we take you to McAllen, Texas, where a shocking crime took place. On the evening of August 6th, a quiet Texas town became the epicenter of a chilling mystery. A rented minivan was seen cruising down a desolate road, its driver moving with an unsettling determination. Hours later, a horrifying discovery was made in a nearby muddy ditch, something that would forever alter the lives of those involved. What really transpired that night? Who was behind it, and why? As the truth began to unravel, a tragic story emerged, leaving a family shattered and a community desperate for answers. Melissa Banda was born on February 8, 1983, to Fidel Banda and Graciela Ortega. Known for her vibrant personality and radiant smile, she was the second oldest of 6 siblings, with 4 sisters and a brother, Fidel Jr. The family eventually settled in McAllen, Texas, a city close to the Mexican border, steeped in rich Hispanic culture. Fluent in Spanish, Melissa was remembered as a bright and diligent student, proudly sharing her academic achievements with her family. After high school, she aspired to pursue higher education in San Antonio, Texas. Upon returning to McAllen, she met Richard Ford, a local man 4 years her senior. Richard had a troubled past, having served 8 years in prison for attempted homicide. Despite this, Melissa fell in love, and the two married in 2008, beginning a life together. Melissa excelled in her career at T-Mobile, rising to the position of District Operations Manager. At the same time, Richard worked as a welder in the Rio Grande Valley, though he often claimed to work in Alaska. The couple had 3 children, Elizabeth, Kimberly, and Richard Jr., and Melissa was a devoted mother, even coaching her daughter's soccer team. Yet, beneath the surface, her marriage was fraught with pain. Richard became controlling and abusive, subjecting Melissa to years of physical and emotional torment. Determined to reclaim her life, she filed for divorce on November 7, 2019, and secured a temporary restraining order for her safety. Her fears proved warranted. Just 2 weeks later, on November 21st, she called the McAllen police in terror. Richard had been relentlessly calling her using a voice-altering device and was on his way to her home, enraged after receiving the divorce papers. Despite Richard's efforts to disguise his identity, Melissa was certain the threatening calls were his. He repeatedly reminded her they were still legally married and issued chilling threats to kill her if she pursued the divorce. When Melissa confided in her father, Fidel, he was stunned. Unaware of the depth of her suffering due to Richard's supposed job in Alaska that kept him away. Determined to protect her, Fidel began accompanying her to places like the gym, waiting outside to ensure her safety. The harassment escalated on February 28, 2020. That day, Melissa planned to meet her sister for lunch, but when she failed to arrive, uncharacteristic of her punctual nature, her sister grew concerned. Repeated calls and messages went unanswered. Alarmed, she rushed to Melissa's home, finding the garage door open and Richard nervously pacing inside. Melissa's dog was outside, an unusual sight. Startled by her presence, Richard quickly demanded she move her car, which blocked his exit. Reluctantly, she complied, and Richard sped off in his silver truck. Inside the garage, she discovered Melissa curled behind a shelf, trembling in fear. Melissa recounted the terrifying ordeal. During an argument over divorce-related finances, Richard became violent. He grabbed her hair, slammed her against a wall, and pinned her down, choking her while cutting off her hair. The most horrifying moment came when he threatened to harm their children if she reported the assault. Fearing for her life, Melissa initially hesitated to act, but her sister persuaded her to contact the police. When the officers arrived, they documented her injuries, and Richard was arrested later that day at an amusement park with their children. During questioning, Richard denied harming Melissa, portraying her as paranoid and hysterical. He claimed she had overreacted, insisting he only restrained her to calm her down and even brought her water afterward. Despite his denials, authorities charged him with third-degree assault for impeding her breathing. Inexplicably, he was released after 24 hours in custody. Following the incident, Melissa and her children briefly stayed at Richard's mother's house before moving in with her sister Cynthia in McAllen. Cynthia and Fidel installed security cameras to enhance her safety, but the harassment persisted. On March 11th, during a divorce hearing, Richard was granted supervised visits with the children and ordered to attend anger management classes. Melissa obtained another restraining order later that month, and their divorce was finalized on April 7th. Even after the divorce, Richard intensified his campaign of intimidation. Between June and August 2020, Melissa filed numerous reports against him. He stalked her at the gym, violated restraining orders, posted her photo and phone number on adult websites, and placed a tracking device on her car. On July 20th, Melissa reported that Richard had stolen her online identity, and on August 5th, the day before another court hearing, she accused him of stealing a vehicle from her property. Despite the relentless harassment, Melissa found solace in her family, especially Cynthia, who often reminded her to stay alert. "If you ever see him, take off your heels and run," she urged, emphasizing the importance of vigilance. Melissa tried to stay optimistic, even laughing when her sister warned her to remain vigilant. However, the nightmare came to a tragic climax on August 6th, 2020. That day, after a court hearing, Melissa called her eldest daughter, Elizabeth, who was staying with a friend, telling her she missed her before heading to her sister's house. At 3:45 p.m., Melissa arrived in the driveway but never made it inside. Richard waited around her house and kidnapped her when she got home. Inside the house, the nanny, Ulissa, was startled by screams coming from the garage. Alarmed, she checked the security cameras and saw a white van speeding away. Rushing outside, she found Melissa's car with the driver's door open and her belongings, including high heels, scattered on the ground. Panicked, Ulissa called 911 and reviewed the footage with Cynthia's eldest son. The video revealed a horrifying scene. Richard had forcibly grabbed Melissa, covering her mouth as she struggled and screamed. Her shoes fell off as he dragged her into the nearby white Dodge minivan, which sped off with Melissa inside. Devastated, the family identified Richard as the abductor and filed an official report with the McAllen Police Department. That evening, Melissa's brother, Fidel Jr., joined other family members in a desperate search, combing through ditches, canals, and landfills for any sign of her. Meanwhile, investigators focused on Richard Ford, Melissa's estranged husband, a man with a documented history of domestic violence. Surveillance video near Melissa's home further implicated Richard, but his initial whereabouts remained unknown. Later that evening, a park ranger noticed a suspicious white van parked about 150 miles from McAllen. When approached, the driver identified himself as Sergio Sanchez, but a routine license plate check flagged the vehicle. Another officer arrived, and they confirmed the man was Richard Ford, who was immediately arrested. The van's GPS data revealed it had been rented from McAllen International Airport and retraced its movements, including stops at Melissa's residence, a market, and a rural area 15 miles from McAllen. Investigators focused on the rural location, where GPS indicated a drainage ditch. The muddy area, softened by recent rain, yielded grim evidence: a pair of jeans, strands of human hair, and a partially buried body. Melissa's remains were found face down, with a horrific neck wound stretching from ear to ear. Forensic analysis revealed the wound had severed critical arteries, the esophagus, and even reached the vertebrae. Additional injuries on her wrists suggested sharp objects or pellets. Autopsy findings indicated the fatal injury was inflicted shortly after her abduction. Evidence from the minivan linked Richard directly to the crime. Microscopic bloodstains on the rear panel and wheel well matched Melissa's DNA. Receipts uncovered during the investigation revealed Richard had purchased hunting knives, zip ties, duct tape, and an air pistol with copper-coated pellets shortly before the incident, indicating premeditation. On August 8, 2020, Richard Ford was formally charged with capital murder in the commission of an aggravated kidnapping. He also faced charges of assault by impeding breathing, violating a protective order, and harassment. Held without bond, his bail was set at $4.5 million. The case against Richard Ford continued to solidify in the days following his arrest. Authorities conducted a thorough search of his silver truck, which had been left parked at McAllen International Airport. Inside, they uncovered a disturbing array of items that further implicated him in Melissa's tragic murder. Among the evidence were copper-coated pellets and carbon dioxide cartridges, both intended for the air pistol found earlier. A large blue canvas bag, seemingly packed with intent, hinted at his preparations for the crime. Additionally, investigators discovered a keychain with a gym membership card connected to the same fitness franchise Melissa regularly visited, suggesting Richard had been monitoring her movements long before the day of her abduction. Despite the mounting evidence, Richard pleaded not guilty to all charges on March 3, 2021. His plea defied the overwhelming documentation of his actions, which investigators described as coldly calculated and methodically planned. From the evidence recovered, it became apparent that Richard had not only meticulously prepared for the crime, but had also intended to eliminate any trace of Melissa. Receipts tied to Richard revealed purchases of hunting knives, zip ties, duct tape, and an air pistol with copper-coated pellets, items investigators believed were intended to aid in her abduction and murder. Surveillance footage from Melissa's home further corroborated these claims, showing Richard forcibly abducting her and driving away in the rented white minivan. The prosecution highlighted these findings as part of their broader narrative of premeditation and malice. While the severity of the charges, capital murder during an aggravated kidnapping, could have led to the pursuit of the death penalty, prosecutors announced on November 8, 2021, that they would instead seek life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The decision reflected the community's focus on justice for Melissa's family rather than prolonged legal proceedings tied to a death sentence. Melissa's family, still grappling with their devastating loss, sought additional accountability. Nearly a year later, on August 5, 2022, her sister filed a federal lawsuit against the city of McAllen and its police department on behalf of Melissa's estate. The lawsuit alleged that Melissa had made 9 calls to the police in the months leading up to her murder, repeatedly pleading for protection from Richard's escalating harassment. Despite these calls and the police's awareness of Richard's violent criminal history, including a 2002 conviction for attempted murder and a prior assault charge, the authorities failed to act decisively. The lawsuit accused the McAllen Police Department of exhibiting a pattern of neglect, particularly in cases of domestic violence involving Hispanic women. The legal action sought a jury trial and compensation for the immense emotional distress Melissa endured, as well as for her medical and funeral expenses. The city of McAllen denied all allegations in the lawsuit, but the case brought renewed scrutiny to law enforcement's handling of domestic violence cases. As Richard's trial date drew closer, the weight of his actions and their consequences loomed large. Jury selection began on February 23, 2024, with the trial officially commencing on February 27th. For Melissa's family and community, the trial represented both a step toward justice and a painful reminder of a life cruelly cut short. Richard Ford now faces life imprisonment, leaving behind a fractured family struggling to cope with the immense void left by Melissa's tragic death. Elizabeth, the eldest daughter, now 16, spoke powerfully about how she feels a part of her died with her mother on that fateful day, August 6th. Through tears, she rhetorically questioned her father's actions, wondering how he could inflict such brutal harm on the woman who loved him. She called him a coward, insisting that only a coward could commit such a heinous act. Directly addressing Richard, Elizabeth accused him of lacking the decency to take responsibility for his actions, reminding him that his role as a father was to protect, not destroy. Tearfully, she expressed her grief not only for the mother she had lost, but also for the father she thought she knew but was now forced to confront as a murderer. Elizabeth recalled the emotional conflict she felt during her parents' divorce, torn between compassion and fear for her father. She lamented that he would no longer be present to witness major milestones in her life, such as her graduation or wedding day. Her voice cracked with pain as she mourned the loss of her best friend, her mother, whose absence left a wound that could never heal. Fidel, Melissa's father, spoke next, recounting the toll the tragedy had taken on their family, especially Melissa's young son, who had been plagued by nightmares since the loss of his mother. With a steely gaze directed at Richard, Fidel demanded that he face the weight of his actions. He wished for Richard to suffer every day in prison, haunted by the memory of the life he had taken from them. Fidel shared memories of Melissa as the family's guiding light, a presence of warmth and joy that will never fade. He reassured the court that though Melissa was gone, she would always be with them in spirit. The judge then handed down the verdict. Richard Ford was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the words were spoken, Richard avoided making eye contact with his children and was escorted out of the courtroom. His defense team announced plans to appeal, but for now, the justice Melissa's family had long awaited was finally realized. Following the sentencing, Melissa's family journeyed to her birthplace to pay tribute to her memory. There, they visited a mural created in her honor, which featured a large, smiling portrait of Melissa with a dove flying above and the words, "I am always with you." A small wrought iron fence encircled the mural, protecting the flowers and tributes left by loved ones who continued to honor her enduring memory. In front of the mural, Elizabeth and Kimberly spoke to Channel 5, sharing how the court's decision felt like a weight lifted from their shoulders. With their father behind bars, they no longer had to live in fear or hide from him. Cynthia, Melissa's sister, expressed her belief that Melissa's presence could still be felt in their lives, providing a sense of comfort and reassurance. She spoke of the relief that justice had been served, while Fidel echoed these sentiments, emphasizing that Melissa would forever remain in their hearts, watching over their family. The emotional and physical scars of this unimaginable tragedy are still fresh, but Melissa's children have found solace and strength within the love of their close-knit family. Though their pain remains, the bonds they share have grown even stronger, providing a foundation of resilience and support. As they move forward, the memory of Melissa, a remarkable mother, daughter, and sister, will serve as a guiding light that continues to illuminate their paths, ensuring that her spirit endures in their hearts. Thank you for listening to True Crime Pulse. Share your thoughts on the story, like and subscribe to the channel. Until next episode, stay safe.